This is the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa. Mid-afternoon, right here in West Alabama, right here. This is the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central and BamaCentral.com. Thanks, everybody, for watching us today. You're watching on Twitter, on YouTube, or on Facebook at Joe Gaither 6. You're watching us on YouTube, on the Bama Central YouTube channel at Bama Central. We appreciate everybody who subscribed to us at Bama Central on the YouTube channel. You can subscribe, rate, and review the program on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. We're going to have a fun Tuesday today, or hopefully going to have a fun Tuesday today. We're going to go out to California and meet up with one of our friends, our co-host of Blue Collar Unplugged, that you're also subscribed to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. Jacob Pickle, Matthew Gibson, and today's guest, Blake Byler of BamaCentral.com. You follow him already on X at BamaCentral45. He's in Los Angeles. He's got a little scruff going on because he's been away for 7 days now, almost 7 days now. And hopefully we'll see if he lasts another 7 more out in Los Angeles. First off, Blake, great to see you. How are you doing today, man? Thanks for your time.
I'm doing well, Joe. How are you doing?
Oh, good. So good to see you. Let's get into, let's start with last week first. Blake Byler was in Spokane. He saw Auburn go down in person. He saw Alabama beat Charleston and Grand Canyon. We talked a good bit about advancing to the Sweet 16 yesterday. So, Blake, I just want to get your take. I'm going to throw 2 or 3 themes at you, and you'll just kind of go. Alabama obviously advances to the Sweet 16, is one of 2 SEC teams into the Sweet 16. Alabama, has an easier road to the Sweet 16. You've heard that a lot. And then let's say one more. Alabama has found its defensive identity in the last weekend. But whatever direction you want to take it off those 3 themes, go. How was your weekend in Spokane?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the easier path, so to speak, and I think that's one thing that we knew was kind of the case going in. We talked whenever we saw the bracket reveal that Alabama did have a somewhat easier path, and that's the reason that I picked them to go to the Sweet 16, and I think that's the reason a lot of Alabama fans were optimistic going into this tournament, because you looked at the draw, and it wasn't terribly difficult, and obviously they've gotten through said draw, so that remains to be a true statement. So you mentioned the defense. Alabama in the first half of the Charleston game, I thought played really, really solid defense. I thought everything kind of looked sharper. There was better communication. And on top of that, they played good offensive basketball, which was something that we hadn't seen from them in really a month. I mean, they scored the 90 points or whatever it was against Arkansas, but things looked a little sloppy in that game. And really just down the stretch with a lot of blowout losses that they suffered, they just weren't playing great offensively. So I thought one thing that they needed to get was a lot of confidence. And once that confidence was built back up, you would see guys not necessarily hesitating to shoot the ball more, attacking the rim with more force, things like that. And I thought you saw that against Charleston. Shots started falling. Guys started playing more loose. I thought they played with a little more swagger, definitely more than they had played with really in a long time, really since back before Latrell Wrightsell had his initial head injury back in kind of middle to late February. And so Alabama wins that game. They score 109 points down the stretch. I think they gave up, I think it was 96 total in that game, but a lot of people left that game talking about the defense just because they looked at the box score, saw that they gave up 96, but really that game was over with 5 to 6 minutes left. Alabama gave up, I think, 30 points in those last 6 minutes. So a lot of those didn't really matter. But as far as Nate Oates was concerned after the game, as far as Alabama's players were concerned, they played 25 to 30 minutes of really good defense. And then that last 10, they kind of let off the gas. Oates talked about how they didn't need to let off the gas anymore, but they played well defensively. And then I thought, the fact that they had emphasized that, it carried over really well into the Grand Canyon game, because all day leading up to it, so we had the game that we covered on Friday night, and then Saturday we got to go back to the arena and talk to players, and kind of the main thing that they were talking about was playing 40 minutes of defense. 40 minutes of defense. That's what Nate Oates said. That's what Nick Pringle said. That's what Mark Sears said. That's what everybody said in the locker room after practice, is we need to play 40 minutes of defense. And so in that Grand Canyon game, that's exactly what they did. I mean, they came out from the opening tip and they were completely locked in defensively. Probably the best defensive performance that they've played since they held South Carolina to below 50 back in early January. They were locked in on switches, on screens, on communication, just everything down the line from effort to communication all looked better than you've seen Alabama play defense in a really, really long time. And to see that carry for the entire game and for it to be a game where Grand Canyon, they're a really athletic team, they're a really physical team. Alabama struggled to score against Grand Canyon, but for them to be able to dig in defensively and finally see come to fruition what Oates has been talking about, where he wants to see mental toughness and see a team where whenever you're not hitting shots, to see that team actually dig in defensively and be able to get stops, even though calls weren't going their way. Nate Oates got a technical, the bench got a technical. They weren't hitting shots. All of that didn't affect their effort on the defensive end of the floor for one of the first times all season. And so I think that's kind of a breakthrough mentally for this team, for them to have been able to win a game like that. And it's good news that you've seen a good defensive effort for 2 games in a row now coming into the Sweet 16, and now they've seen that they can win a game that way. So it was a good weekend all around, and I thought the Grand Canyon game, even though it was sloppy, even though it was against a 12 seed or whatever, it was one of the more impressive ways that I've seen this Alabama team win a game this year.
All right, so I want to build right off of what this Grand Canyon game, this conversation, because I feel largely the same way. I was so impressed with the effort all the way throughout, particularly the close. So you held them 0 points for the last 4 minutes with really gritty defense, and you turn them over. But the other side of the coin and the detractors against Alabama's defense are saying, oh, well, Grand Canyon, not that really good of an offense. They only had 5 assists. They were going one-on-one. Bryce Drew wasn't really running a whole lot of good offensive sets to challenge the Alabama defense. And, it was basic stuff. And I see that too. But I want, but basically following this team all year long, the growth of the mental mindset of saying, okay, I don't care what you're running. And yeah, they may not have been running the most complex offense. They've won 30 games. They won 30 games this year. They averaged 12 assists per game, so they weren't really averaging that many assists for the season comparatively for NCAA. I think it's always that came in at 212 or so on the list, 12 assists per game. So it's not like that's really their game, anyways. What would you say to Ben? Because Charles Barkley, that was the stupidest, that was the dumbest offense I've ever seen in my life. So, what do you say to that? Because was it good Alabama defense, or was it just, maybe lackluster or not intelligent offense, not good offense by Grand Canyon?
I mean, I think there's a little bit of truth to that. I don't think Grand Canyon necessarily ran the most complex offense there is to guard, but they're still, like you said, a team that's won 30 games. They're a team that has they beat San Diego State in the regular season. That's another Sweet 16 team. They, efficiency-wise, rank, I think, in either the top 60 or the top 50 with their offense. And they have guys that, even if they are running a couple of iso ball possessions, they have guys that are good enough to score. Tylen Grant Foster specifically. I mean, you saw what he did. He scored 29 points. A lot of those came at the free throw line. But I think just the way that Alabama defended, even in those situations, like Alabama in a lot of games this year hasn't been able to guard somebody one-on-one in an isolation situation.
Walter Clayton Jr.
Right, exactly. Like Florida was able to just clear everybody out and get to the rim with ease, or Alabama would overhelp, leave a shooter, you name it. Like a number of defensive miscues that Alabama has made time and time again throughout this season. And in this game, they didn't make them. There was one situation, and this probably won't sound great with me speaking it out, but I'm visualizing it, where there was like a double screen. There was basically a triple switch that Alabama had to do. And it was Mark Sears, it was Modi Abate, and it was Rylan Griffin. And the three of them like sharply communicated, switching onto their men in 2 seconds time. And there wasn't any overlap there. And just seeing that, also sitting as close as I was to the game and being able to actually hear their communication, it just looked better than anything you've seen from them in a really long time. And it showed how mental it has been with this team as far as their defense goes. I don't think this team has elite or even great defensive personnel, especially when it comes to rim protection or length from guards guarding the perimeter because Alabama loves to run the 4-guard starting lineup. But to see what this team can do defensively when there is 100% lock in and the mental aspect is taken care of, it shows that Nate Oates was right that they could be a top 50 defensive team, even if they don't necessarily have a Herb Jones, a Keon Ellis, a Jordan Bruner, a Charles Bediako, a Noah Clowney, any of those great defensive players. They can still be a good defensive unit as a team.
Blake Byler, have you eaten today?
I have not. It is 9:12 a.m. here.
Okay, all right. Well, I've had my breakfast. You will have breakfast soon or lunch soon, some sort of a sustenance soon, right?
Yes.
All right, and that's going to make your day probably go a whole lot better. My point is, Mo Diabate, what in the world? How do you have that great energy off no food? Ramadan, I mean, obviously, you spiritual strength, and that's great. That's the idea of that. And just unbelievable. Can we get more Mo Diabate minutes? Where can we carve out more time for Mo Diabate? Because I just love it. And he won the game. I mean, what was your takeaways from Mo Diabate and all his effort?
I mean, all weekend, he has been arguably the most impactful player for Alabama whenever he steps on the court. And it started in the Charleston game. Alabama went down 19-13 in that game. Oates puts him in, and he grabs a rebound. He gets a steal and a run-out dunk, and he just makes things happen. And then Alabama gets down in the Grand Canyon game, and they're down, I think, 3 with 5 minutes to go, somewhere around there. And I'm thinking to myself, the entire building at this point, because there's already the big crowd of Grand Canyon students, but then there's also Yale fans, there's San Diego State fans, and everybody in that building except for the small, maybe 10, 15% Alabama fans that were behind the bench wanted an upset because that's how NCAA tournament sites work. It's fun. And with the building now behind them and Grand Canyon on a little, I think 8-10-0 run up 3 points, it looked really dire. And then Mo Diabate comes in after Jaron Stevenson fouls out on an and one, and he grabs 2 straight offensive rebounds off of free throws. On the second one, he puts it back up in for an and one. And from that, the entire Alabama bench, which beforehand was kind of hanging their heads, they didn't look very into it. They all of a sudden were up cheering. You had coaches slapping the floor. You had defense chants from then on to the rest of the game. And it just changed the entire energy of the way that Alabama was playing. And I totally agree what you said about him needing more minutes. I mean, he does a lot in the minutes that he's given, but I don't even know how many minutes he played, like 10, 12.
I think it was 11. It was 9 in the second half down the stretch.
Yes. And I think that was 9 of Alabama's last 15 points, if I remember right. And so whenever he's playing that way, and we talked to him in the locker room after the game, and he was like, my job is to just go in and do stuff, to be a dog. Like that's what his role on the team is. And whenever he's able to do that, it completely changes what Alabama does. It gives them more of a blue collar attitude, because I think he definitely has the most of that out of anyone on the team. And just whenever he's in, things happen. Good things happen. He makes winning basketball plays, and that's the kind of guy that you need on every team. He reminds me a lot of the way Herb Jones affected the game when he was younger, back before he became the SEC Player of the Year. Maybe the way Juwan Gary affected the game back when he was a freshman playing on that 2021 team that went to the Sweet 16. He's just a guy that goes in and cleans stuff up and makes things happen.
So let's put ourselves in the coaching room. It's you, it's Oates, it's Pannone, and it's like, okay, you got to get him more minutes, or you're arguing for how much of the offensive deficiency is kept him off the floor. I mean, because I know the 3-point shot's not there, but my man slashes to the basket so aggressively, and really, he goes up after any rebound. So, like, I know he's not a shooter, and so the spacing might throw things off. How much of the spacing are you sacrificing? What are you really sacrificing when he's in there? Spacing wise, I don't know if I'm getting to a question quite clearly, but like there's got to be some sort of give and take, because you're getting a lot of energy and effort plays, but you're obviously giving you're not getting the shooting that you're getting with Jaron Stevenson or Sam Walters, and those are kind of where I see his minutes coming from. What's your takeaway on kind of the balance between the two?
I mean, I think it comes down to who you're playing him with and what you need in the moment. So, like, I don't really know necessarily whose minutes you pull to give him more minutes. I think it's going to be very situational. And Oates is like, oh, we need a spark. Put him in, pull this guy. More so than looking ahead of the game, seeing who you pull away from. Because when he is in, the offense can struggle from a half-court perspective because you don't have the same driving lanes whenever you have Sam Walters in there that pulls his man out to the three-point line. He's a guy that you can sag off of because he's not a great three-point shooter. But if he's in at, say, the 4 and you can play Grant Nelson in a 4 out and have him in the middle, then he can clean stuff up on the glass and make things happen there. It really just is very dependent on what lineups you're playing him with and who's around him at that time.
All right, so last thing on Diabate, and this is more inside baseball kind of Ramadan fasting. I want to get this. I want to ask you about this and put it in your ear to maybe ask him. So y'all are on the West Coast, right? He's been used to fasting. Probably. I mean, you never know how long a guy has been, was serious about things. But he's been used to fasting for the last couple of years, I'm sure. On the East Coast, the time zones, your body clock says, I got to wake up before the sun comes up and have a small snack. So that's what, 5 a.m. We'll just say 5:30 a.m. But now you're going to the West Coast. So that 5:30 a.m. on your body clock is now you have to get up at what, 3:30 on your body clock. Now it says 5:30, yes, on the clock. I don't know if the time zones are, if I'm making it clearly, but basically you're 2 hours behind on your clock. So you are now having to force yourself to wake up even earlier for that morning snack, or sacrifice the morning snack for sleep, and thus push it. You're getting the evening meal 2 hours earlier. I wonder how the time zones have made this fasting experience different than other fasting experience than other years, and if he's found it more challenging or less challenging because, okay, now I'm on the West Coast, so it comes 2 hours earlier on my body clock. Yeah, it's the same clock on the time clock, but on my body clock, how I wake up, it's 2 hours earlier. I have no idea. And then the other thing is, how is he loading up? Is it a bunch of pizza at night? Is it a bunch of steak at night? Is it a bunch of chicken at night? Like, what? I would love to know kind of what his method for load, because you got to be loading up at night. Once it's time to eat, it's like you got to be having 2 or 3, over the course of that evening. So just either your thoughts on that or something to put in your back pocket the next time you talk to him.
Yeah, that's something that's definitely interesting. I think I will ask him about that, because just with the transition to the West Coast, how that works. I think one thing that's funny is Mo Wagi, who is also fasting for Ramadan, he had Uncrustables, like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, like with him, that he had like a box of them in the locker room. And I think they brought him out to him on the bench when the sun went down. So they were saying after the Charleston game, which I know started a little later. So I think the sun went down towards the end of that game, whereas the Grand Canyon game, it was once the game was over. But once there were like 4 or 5 minutes left in the game, I'm pretty sure they brought them something to be able to eat towards the end of the game. But it's really interesting and really impressive that they've been able to not only play, but have the impact on the game that they've had during all of this.
Absolutely. Testament to their spirit and their will, and just another interesting aspect of this tournament. You want to talk about North Carolina? You want to educate me and the people on the Tar Heels? Oh, my gosh. One of the bluest of blue bloods in college basketball stands in front of Alabama on Thursday. ACC regular season champions beating Duke on their home in Cameron Indoor Stadium in the last day to basically clinch the title. Then they went to the ACC championship game, losing to NC State, right? So they have a great experience. Armando Bacot, national champion. RJ Young, and then Hubert Davis has been, national champion, missed a tournament, now back in as a 1 seed. Maybe the weakest 1 seed, arguably, with Houston. Tell us what you know about Houston beyond just the facts that I just listed out that anybody can see on Google.
I mean, North Carolina is a really balanced team, and they've got a bunch of really good basketball players. I mean, they're a 1 seed for a reason. maybe the weakest 1 seed, I would argue, just because of how dominant UConn, Purdue, Houston have been all season. But from Armando Bacot being a fifth-year senior, being as dominant as he's been in the paint. I mean, Alabama played Bacot when he was a freshman during Oates' first year back in the battle for Atlantis. They've got an all-ACC, maybe he was ACC Player of the Year point guard, and RJ Davis. And the matchup that he's going to have with Mark Sears is going to be incredible. You keep going down the list. They've got Elliot Cadeau, a five-star freshman guard that plays next to Davis. They've got Cormac Ryan, who Alabama fans will remember from Notre Dame 2 years ago, the player that hit.
Can we pause right there?
Yes.
Right there? Kai Spears. Can Kai Spears earn his scholarship? Go in there. Give me 1 minute on Cormac Ryan with a broken nose. Sorry, man, you get ejected, but you're not really going to be playing anyways. But just go ahead and eliminate Cormac. Oh, nightmares of Cormac Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan, when he hit the 8 threes against Alabama in the first round in 2022, when he used to play for Notre Dame. So UNC's got a lot of players. Hubert Davis is a good coach. I think this is his third year. Like you said, he's been to a national championship game. So he knows what he's doing in the tournament. This team is very balanced. They've got a top 20 offense. They've got a top 6 defense on KenPom. So it doesn't really lean one way or the other with them. I think it's going to be challenging. I think the fact that Bacot is there in the middle makes this incredibly difficult for Alabama, given their lack of interior defense and where they've struggled in that area this season. This is also a rematch of last year's 4 overtime game from the Portland, the Phil Knight Invitational that happened a year ago, last November of 2022, going into the 2023 season, where I think Charles Bediako played a huge role in that game. Obviously, he would have been nice to have for this matchup. North Carolina had Caleb Love back then, but also RJ Davis had a big game. So Mark Sears and Davis are familiar with each other. They played against each other before. So I'm really excited for the matchup. It's going to be fun. I mean, you have to get excited to see a team like North Carolina in a Sweet 16 setting in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. A blue blood, like you said, it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be a fun uniform matchup. North Carolina is going to wear their whites. Alabama's probably going to be in their reds. It's going to be fun. And I think it's going to be challenging, but very, very excited for it for sure.
All right. So that's Thursday night. And really, let's talk about, funny aside for Cormac Ryan. Are you what's the defensive matchup? Hey, this guy's got to win. This guy's got to get. Is it in the interior or is it slowing down the guys on the outside? You already know you're going to struggle on the inside. So do you say, okay, we're just going to let you get what you're going to get, and Grant Nelson, Wagi, you guys are going to battle Stevenson, do your best, But on the outside, it's basically Latrell. If you're healthy, we think you're going to be healthy. It's Rylan Griffin, and you guys got to. Make it frustrating for the RJ Youngs, for the Cormac Ryans, for the outside wing players, for the guards to give Alabama a chance. What do you think is the best? Alabama's got to do this to give themselves a chance to slow down North Carolina.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Bacot is so big and dominant with the way that Alabama struggled in the interior this year. I think he's just kind of a lock to be able to get his unless something went terribly wrong for him. So I don't think there's really going to be any stopping him. He's probably going to have close to 20 points, might have 15 rebounds. That's just going to be what it is with how good he is. But I think if Alabama can slow down RJ Davis, Cormac Ryan, guys like that, I imagine Rylan Griffin is probably going to be the matchup for Ryan. As far as RJ Davis, I'm not sure who they're going to put on him. Maybe Latrell Wrightsell if he's good enough to go at full speed. Maybe Mark Sears since they've guarded each other before. But I think the key is slowing those two guys down. If RJ Davis has a slower game, if Cormac Ryan isn't hitting threes at the rate that he has much of this season, then Alabama's got a good chance. But I definitely think there's not going to be much slowing down of Bacot with how good he is and how good he's been all season, especially with Alabama's lack of rim protection.
The Crimson Tide shot 24% from beyond the arc against Grand Canyon. Previously, they were 1-6 in those games. Now, Alabama is 2-6 in games where they're shooting 24% or under. Let's just leave that in the back of our minds. Blake Byler, what's the magic number, either percentage-wise or make-wise, that Alabama has to hit? They got to hit 12 threes. They got to hit 15 threes. They got to hit what number of three-pointers or what percentage-wise do they have to make at to really, challenge North Carolina?
They're going to need a really good shooting game. Like, I don't think it can be a game necessarily like Grand Canyon where it's a rock fight and they can stay in it. I think North Carolina can probably score too consistently inside for Alabama to hang around if they're not hitting shots. So I think between 35 and 40% is probably needed to be in the game. If Alabama shoots over 40%, I mean, they may very well win the game. And that's the thing with this team is you always have the what if of
they were 50% in the first half against Grand Canyon.
Exactly. They could just go out and make everything, and then they've got North Carolina on the road.
Excuse me, against Charleston.
Right, yeah. And they might have a big lead. And so the 3-point shooting is going to be very important in this game. Alabama actually, under Oates, has had a history of shooting really well in the round of 32 and then shooting poorly in the Sweet 16. Shot poorly against San Diego State. I remember not shooting very well against UCLA in 2021. And so now you might have a flip situation where Alabama didn't shoot well in the round of 32. Maybe that sets up a good shooting performance on Thursday. They definitely need it with how good North Carolina is and with the way that they can score inside. It's going to be needed. But if Alabama can make their shots, which we know that they can, and we've seen them play with more confidence now, because even though they weren't necessarily hitting shots against Grand Canyon, I didn't think they were hesitant to shoot like I'd seen it against Florida and Nashville and kind of down the stretch at the end of the season. But also you've seen Alabama, they might have a renewed sense of confidence as far as being in their defense after what they did against Grand Canyon, knowing that if they miss a couple shots early, that they can stay in it, play defense, and then get the 3-ball going later. But I definitely think they're going to need a pretty solid shooting performance to win this one or even stay in it.
Absolutely. And it's going to be, a lot of fun. And really, from a program perspective, to put a bow on kind of this matchup and move into, I guess, our picks. From a program perspective, three of the last 4 years, back-to-back years in the Sweet 16. You're playing North Carolina. You roll the dice. You get a good roll, and you might be making program history. Just Nate Oates and his 5 years has Alabama right here. What do you think of? Oh, that's what I wanted to add. I had this note. Okay, with that, has Alabama right here, but Nate Oates talked on Hey Coach last night and said, okay, we've been knocking on the door, but we need to get to a Final Four to basically prove that we're a real program. That was kind of a paraphrase of his comments. What do you make of that? I mean, obviously that's the goal. Yeah, sure. But I think, oh boy, you put a little pressure on yourself this weekend, which I guess is kind of Nate's style. What's your kind of thoughts on the state of the program and obviously everything that Alabama went through over the last 6 weeks to get to here, and then B, Nate Oates' comments, we're knocking on the door, but we got to get there to prove that we're a real program.
Yeah, I think as far as the state of the program goes, this is as healthy as it's been in decades. I mean, 3 Sweet 16s in 4 years is pretty unheard of. I don't think that's happened since Wimp was here. And so you have that level of sustained tournament success, which is impressive. And then you've also had the SEC success with 4 titles between the regular season and the tournament. So it's incredible, the amount of consistency that Oates has been able to bring to this program. And just the fact that Alabama is even there this year, I think they've overachieved already for them to be where they are. I mean, going in, we know what they lost last offseason with the assistant coaches, with Miller and Clowney being first-round picks, with Charles Bediako leaving unexpectedly. You had Javon Quinterly leave late into the offseason when he had already said he was coming back. So you had all of these losses that some of them were expected, some of them were unexpected, but the bottom line was Alabama was picked closer to the middle of the league than the top necessarily, as far as the SEC goes. And then you go 13-5 in the SEC after starting the season 6-5. So you had a big turnaround there, and it's just very impressive job. One of, I probably think, his best coaching job from Nate Oates, to see what he has done this season to get Alabama back to the Sweet 16. But as far as what Oates said about the Final Four, I think from a national perspective, I don't disagree with him. I mean, a lot of people don't take coaches or programs seriously until they reach that Final Four. And I don't necessarily agree with that statement, because I think there's a lot more that goes into college basketball than just winning 4 games in March. But it's very important, and it is a huge milestone for your program. And so Alabama's got a chance here to, they're halfway there. They've won 2 games. They've got 2 more to win if they want to get there. And on top of that, this is going to be the first time that Alabama's been able to play the underdog role in an NCAA tournament run. The entire first 3 tournaments, Alabama has never played a game as the lower seeded team under Nate Oates in the NCAA tournament. Every single time they've been the higher seed, which means every time they've lost, they've been the higher seed. So we haven't gotten to see Oates coach his team kind of like he coached those Buffalo teams whenever they were a 13 seed and they knocked off 4 seed Arizona back in 2018. Like, Oates hasn't been able to coach this team as an underdog in the tournament yet. And so that's another kind of angle to this game that I'm excited to see, is how Oates handles that, because in some regular season games, especially some big non-conference ones, Alabama has played well as the underdog. They've beaten Gonzaga up in Seattle. They've beaten Houston on the road, teams like that over the course of Oates' career or his tenure at Alabama. He's gotten a lot out of his guys in those underdog settings. And so that makes me very excited to see what he has and what the guys have for this game, now that they're actually able to embrace that. And honestly, the pressure is kind of off of them now. Like, they've accomplished and probably overachieved what they were supposed to at this point in the season. Now they're kind of playing with house money. And so the guys can play loose. They can play free. There's no real expectations on them. It's like, whatever you do is whatever you do. And you've already done what you were expected to do.
Absolutely. We've been talking to Blake Byler. He covers Alabama basketball for us at BamaCentral.com, and you're already following him at Blake Byler 45. He's been spending the week on the West Coast and Spokane. Now he's in Los Angeles. We're about to make our Sweet 16 picks, but before we do that, Blake, what's the highlight of the trip so far that's not basketball related? A sight you've seen, a meal you've had, an experience you've experienced on the West Coast that maybe didn't make Blake Byler 45 on the timeline that you're going to take away from this week so far?
Yeah, well, I've only been in LA for not even a full day yet. So it definitely comes from Spokane. I'd never been up there. Really had never been to the Pacific Northwest before, and definitely not to Washington. And so just the landscape, the mountains, the trees. Spokane has a river with like waterfalls that runs it divides downtown with another part of the city. And so just to be able to see that was beautiful. The city was beautiful. Definitely a very enjoyable stay there, and a place I'd like to go back to, but not sure if I'll get to. But just to have been able to experience that was really cool.
Awesome. All right, so the Sweet 16 is freaking loaded. Oh my gosh, it is awesome. It is like heavyweight after heavyweight hitter, and we'll make our picks here. We'll save Alabama, North Carolina for last, so we'll go in basically in time order, Thursday, then through Friday, and then we'll circle back to Alabama, Carolina. All right, so let's go to 6 o'clock, 6:09 on CBS on Thursday. 6 seed Clemson against 2 seed Arizona. The winner plays the winner of the Alabama-North Carolina game in the next round. Arizona, a 7.5-point favorite, a team that's beaten Alabama before. A loaded team, our buddy Jaden Bradley on the team, but Clemson and Alabama both Clemson and Arizona both beating Alabama this year. What do you make of this matchup, and what are you thinking? We'll see what happens.
I'm thinking Arizona there. I mean, I just think I'm surprised Clemson made it this far, to be honest with you. They played really well against Baylor. I also thought Baylor was a team that was vulnerable. I didn't think that their defense could necessarily hold up through this whole tournament. They've kind of had a similar problem that Alabama has had for much of the season, and that they play really good offense, but their defense has struggled. So I think Arizona is just too good. I think they're going to be able to handle Clemson fairly easily. And that's the game we'll get to watch too, because that's also in the West Regional. And so that'll be the game before Alabama's on Thursday.
Just hit me. Will you see your friend Austin Hannon out there? Is he covering?
Unfortunately,
Okay. He's going to be from afar. Okay. He's been covering Clemson. If anybody on the BamaCentral side has been missing Austin Hannon, you can check out his Clemson coverage now. He's been doing a great job. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Clemson, not really a great three-point shooting team. I think Arizona, just a little more mature, been more battle-tested, is going. Their quality is going to kind of just shine through maybe the last 10 minutes of that game. 6:39 on True TV and TBS. Double channel. Oh, that's cool. A rematch of last year's national championship game. San Diego State plays the big bad beast, UConn. UConn, 11.5-point favorite. Can San Diego State maybe get back here, or is it going to be the same old story?
UConn's too good. They have been unstoppable this whole tournament and really the whole regular season. I don't see them losing at all. I think they're going to win the whole thing, but they're not going to lose before they get to the Final Four national championship game. San Diego State, they impressively beat Yale the other day, and they played a solid game. UAB gave them a fight, but San Diego State's a good team, but I don't think they have enough to beat UConn.
Let's step outside the box very quickly. If Auburn had beaten Yale, you like San Diego State in that Auburn San Diego State game? That would have been a great
potentially.
Game.
I think it would have been a good one, probably one of the games of the day, just because of the physicality that San Diego State plays with. It would have made things challenging for them. I think it would have been really interesting for sure.
Unfortunately for the Auburn Tigers, they didn't get to see it. Okay, going on 9 o'clock on TBS, another double channel game, TBS and True TV. Illinois is taking on Iowa State. A lot of people love Iowa State. Iowa State, a 1.5-point favorite. You think the Hawkeyes will advance or not?
I mean, that was really the defense versus offense game. I mean, Illinois is number one, I think, currently in KenPom offense, and Iowa State's number one in defense. I think I'm going to go with Iowa State in that one. I've loved the way they played all season. They really impressed me with how they beat Houston in the Big 12 championship game. And they've been solid in the tournament so far. Illinois' offense has been really impressive, but I think I'm going to go with Iowa State in that one.
Oh my gosh, I hate to agree with 3 for 3. We'll go Iowa State again because I think just the defense is more. It travels easier in the tournament. It's easier to carry with you through a tournament. We'll skip on to Friday before we circle back to Alabama. On Friday at 6:09, 11 seed NC State, the little engine that could, continues to win. They're playing number 2 seed Marquette. Marquette at 6.5-point favorite. You like the ACC tournament champions to keep it going, or the fighting Shaka Smarts?
NC State has to run out of gas eventually, don't you think? They've won 7 games in a row now, and it's been 7 games in just over a week.
11 days or something.
7 games in 10, 11 days. So I don't know how much more they have left in them. I think Marquette is really good. I think Tyler Kolek is a guard that can actually match up well with DJ Horn, who's given, I feel like, everybody a problem. And then the matchup of DJ Burns and Iguodaro on the inside is going to be really fun. But I think Marquette's just the better team. And so as far as picks go, I think they'll win. But it'd be really fun to see NC State keep this run going and win another one.
It absolutely would be fun. Crazy that they're the Cinderella. 11 seed NC State ACC champion is the Cinderella of this group. So, but I think their gas probably runs out. 6:39, a double channel game. Number 5, Gonzaga against Purdue. Oh my gosh, big bad Zach Edey, 5.5-point favorite. He rectified their error of losing to Fairleigh Dickinson in the first round. And golly, every time they tried to interview, I don't know if you got to see it because you're out there on the West Coast covering Alabama so well. Every single time they tried to ask him a question, all that matters is we got the win. All that matters is we got the win. We got the win. We got the win. Basically, well, how you feeling today? Oh, what'd you eat today? Oh, just anything. Oh, they played defense. Oh, we got the win. That's all he's focused. He's like a robot. You think Purdue is going to continue, or can Gonzaga and Mark Few move to the Elite Eight?
I actually this is a game that I picked previously, like in my original bracket before, or when the whole tournament challenge came out. I did pick Gonzaga to get to this point and beat Purdue. So I think I have to stick with it. I think Graham Ike is strong enough on the inside to be able to actually match up decently well with Zach Edey. Obviously, he's better, and Zach Edey has been a problem for everybody. But I like Mark Few. I picked Gonzaga in my bracket, so I'm gonna go with it. I think Gonzaga gets that game and moves on, but that's gonna be a really, really exciting game with two teams that have been kind of at the top of college basketball for the last couple of years.
You say you like Mark Few, and we're over here kind of celebrating Nate Oates for getting back-to-back Sweet 16s. How do you think 9 Sweet 16s in a row? Mark Few, that's insane, man. That is absolutely insane. I'll go against you here just for the sake of the show. I do think Gonzaga has a great chance to win the game, but we'll take Big Bad Frankenstein, Zach Edey, to continue. One more thing on Edey. He still is. Like, I know the NBA game is 3-and-D now and like fun and gun, but like he's still not even really getting any sort of draft buzz at all. Like, can't he play 12 minutes in the league every night and give somebody a different look? And like, come on.
He can, and he will. He'll be a backup center in the league. Like that, he's too good around the basket and too big to not, you know.
Absolutely. All right, we'll keep it going. 2 more games on Friday night. Number 4 Duke against number 1 Houston, 8:39 on Big Boy CBS. Houston 4.5-point favorite. Kelvin Sampson. Golly, they have such mature guard play. Unbelievable. And I think that's what's going to carry on. But what do you think about the Houston Cougars against the Dukies?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Houston, they're just too solid. Like they don't make mistakes really. Outside of however they left Garcia open at the end of the Texas A&M game. But Houston, I think, one, I'm surprised that Duke, not surprised necessarily that they made it this far given their path, but I thought they didn't look great towards the end of the season, especially with that first round ACC tournament loss. And I just think Houston is too good defensively to lose that game. So I'll go with Houston.
All right, a game I'm so excited for just from a basketball standpoint. Number 3, Creighton against number 2, Tennessee on both TBS and True TV. The Volunteers are a 2.5-point favorite, and I really hate to have any sort of affinity for Tennessee, but I love watching them play because they play basketball just the right way. But Creighton does too. It's going to be a lot of fun. 2 teams that both beat Alabama this year. What do you think, Blue Jays versus Volunteers?
Probably my most anticipated game of the tournament between Creighton and Tennessee. It's one that I'm super excited to watch, and 2 teams that are really fun to watch. I'm going to go with Tennessee because Tennessee's been really good for a lot of years under Rick Barnes. They made 2 Sweet 16s. They've always been great defensively, but like Dalton Connect is that one piece that they've never had that would be able to get them over the hump in March. And they've lost these games in March because they've been missing a guy like him. And now they have him. And so I think he's going to have a great game. It's going to be super exciting to watch, but because they have him and he's the best player in the game, I'm going to go with Tennessee to win that one.
Yeah, I think Zakai Ziegler is going to do a good job on Baylor Shireman, just defending him. And I have Tennessee in my Final Four, so I'm going to have them continue to keep going. But I think it's going to be a blast. I'm really, really excited about that game. All right, circling back, final pick, and we'll get out of here for the day. Thank you so much for your time, Blake Byler, hanging out there in Los Angeles. You follow him at Blake Byler 45. You're already subscribed to his podcast, The Blue Collar Unplugged, with his friends Matthew Gibson and Jacob Pickle. All right, Alabama, North Carolina. 4.5-point favorites for the Blue Bloods, North Carolina. Armando Bacot against, anybody who stands a chance in the middle. Can Alabama advance to their second Elite Eight in school history?
I'm tempted to pick Alabama because I know that, like, with Nate Oates talking about we need to get to a Final Four for program recognition and everything, and them being able to kind of embrace the underdog role and them playing defense very well lately. I'm tempted to pick Alabama. I think they want it. I think they have a good chance, and I think it's going to be a good game. But ultimately, I think North Carolina is just better, and I think Bacot specifically is going to be too much inside for Alabama to handle. And I could be wrong, and they could go out and make every three, and they could win the game by 10 if they do that. And that's entirely possible. But I think as far as picks go, I'm going to have to go with North Carolina. But I'm really excited for the game, and it's going to be a fun one for sure.
It kills me, but I think I gotta agree with you in all that way. I think North Carolina just is a little more consistent on the offensive end, a little more consistent on the defensive end. And while Alabama does look better defensively in these last two games, I hope that it will carry over. Just from a fan, if it does carry over, then it's going to be a great game. It's going to be, 77-75. It's going to be 83-84. It's going to be really, really a close game. But you got to go with the experience of the program and the people who got to go with Carolina. That's going to stink, but I think they're going to win. Blake, any big plans between now and Thursday night? You made it to a ball game last night. Anything else in LA you're going to do? You're going to go see the Hollywood sign or see anything out there?
Yeah, not sure yet. We're kind of just taking it as we go. We'll figure it out.
All right, well, go see the ocean and make sure you follow Blake Byler for all of his coverage at Blake Byler 45. Thanks so much for your time today, Blake, and we'll see you, hopefully soon. Maybe we'll be doing this again. Oh, my gosh, if we're doing this again next week, shoot me in the face. All right, Blake, hope you have a great day.
All right, thanks, Joe.
Yes, sir. As Blake Byler joining us today on the Joe Gaither Show, you already follow him at Blake Byler 45, and we are so excited about Alabama getting to the Sweet 16. He's covering it all right there. We'll see if the Crimson Tide can surprise. If the Crimson Tide can surprise both Blake and myself, you can let us know how far you think Alabama will go by joining us in the comments at Joe Gaither 6 on any of the social media machines. You can follow the show, The Joe Gaither Show, on BamaCentral, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on Amazon. We thank Blake for his time today. He's very busy out there in the West Coast. Make sure you follow him at Blake Byler 45. We're going to get out of here for the afternoon. We'll talk to you tomorrow. We'll be back with another edition of The Joe Gaither Show on Wednesday on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com.
Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral. Keep up with Joe on all his social media pages at Joe Gaither 6. Subscribe, rate, and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and be sure to read us daily at BamaCentral.com.